You're probably wondering just what is cause and effect in a relation to your novel. Well, the textbook explanation is it explains the relationship that exists between two ideas or objects when one acts upon the other and then moves on to create an impact upon a third separate idea or object. Have you ever noticed that textbook answers always sound as though they're reading from a school textbook? If I were to explain it, I would simply say cause is why the event happens and effect is what happened as a result of that. It's like I show you something and then you show me something in return. That's actually about as basic as it gets. Time for another of my little tales. A man sits quietly in his home weeping. He has just heard the horrific news that his wife has been found dead. Up until that phone call, she had been his sole reason for living. Everything he had done from the moment he had been introduced to her by Rupert, an acquaintance a year earlier, had been to make her happy. And the happier he made her, the happier he himself became. Eliza had become everything he desired in life, and Robert quickly became everything she could ever hope for. They were so in love that spending just a day apart seemed like an eternity. When Eliza decided to travel to their countryside home for a visit with his sister, he wanted to go with her, but his sister insisted she have the chance to meet and get to know his wife alone without any interference. When he got the call that she had been killed when her car ran off the road during her return home, he blamed himself. She could have waited until the following morning, but he missed her so much that he encouraged her to not wait and drive home that same night. A few weeks after her death, a woman appeared at his door. The first moment that Robert laid eyes on her, he believed her to be his recently deceased wife, Eliza, but soon realized that this woman merely resembled her. It turns out this woman was a con artist who made her living by pursuing those who have recently lost a loved one and offering her services as a medium so the bereaved can remain in contact with the one they have lost. Robert was a shrewd businessman who had been subjected to a great deal of con artists in his life. He knew how to spot them and knew when they would usually make an appearance. It just so happens this woman was the third of her kind to show up at his door since his wife's passing. His first reaction was to slam the door in the woman's face, but the fact that she resembled his wife so much had him deciding to hear what she had to say. By the end of their conversation, he still didn't believe that she could be a medium for his wife, but sitting and speaking with her had allowed him to momentarily forget about the pain of loss that had remained with him since the passing of Eliza. Each evening, around the same time, Helen would arrive and go into her routine, pretending to conjure up the spirit of his dead wife so he could spend a few hours with her. Ooh. He still didn't believe what she did was real, but he so enjoyed his time with Helen and found it easier with each visit to convince himself that he was actually speaking with his beloved wife, especially since she looked so much like her. He soon realized that meeting with Helen just once each evening wasn't enough. The rest of his time he was alone and did little else than to anticipate the evening when she would return. He didn't care how much extra it would cost, so he begged her to come an hour earlier and stay an hour later. That worked for a short time, but he soon desired more of her time. Money being of no concern, he asked to see more of her. He still didn't believe that Helen was a medium, but he was beginning to believe that she was the reincarnation of his departed wife. But it wasn't just because the resemblance, it was also the many intimate details that the woman knew of. You see, Helen, this con artist, had a partner who was giving her all kinds of detailed information about the deceased woman. This partner knew everything about her. He should, after all. He was Rupert, the one who introduced Robert with his wife in the first place and set the whole con up. The plan was for Helen to get close enough to to Robert, to the point where he would believe anything she told him and pay dearly for it. And it worked. A few weeks later, and Robert asked Helen to move in with him. He also asked her to marry him. She quickly agreed, realizing that once she was married to Robert, she and Rupert would find a way to get rid of him and share the wealth she would ultimately inherit. They were married quickly at a private ceremony and lived in bliss for the next few weeks. Robert was convinced that he had married his reincarnated wife while the woman made plans with Rupert to plan his death. Then one day, Robert suggests that they travel to their country home so Helen can meet his sister. When his sister knew they were coming, she asked for Helen to come alone so she could get to know her without her brother's interference. Today, I'll talk about the importance of cause and effect, and then I'll tell you what happened when Helen met Delilah at the country home. Here's some basic cause and effect situations that you can probably relate to. Cause. A mother can't find her stepstool, so is unable to put the cookie jar back up onto the top shelf and instead leaves it on the kitchen counter. Effect. Her cookie-loving daughter is now able to reach the cookie jar and after eating her fill, ends up with a stomachache. Cause. The man's car won't start. He must find a different way of getting to work. Effect. He takes the bus that he is unfamiliar with and arrives to work late, missing his important meeting. Cause. A bolt of lightning strikes a tree. Effect. The tree was split in half and fell onto a power line, knocking out power for that neighborhood. Cause and effect is the way we all live our lives. Have you ever heard the saying, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction? To be honest with you, this isn't really the same as cause and effect, nor did Newton's third law of motion intend it to be. I'm using it simply to say that, like having a reaction to a prior action, there is always an effect to any prior cause. Time for one of my little examples to help you understand just what I'm trying to say. A man whose house was foreclosed walks into the bank with a gun. The potential for an exciting story is revealed. There is obvious cause and effect here. The cause being the bank foreclosing on the man's house, and the effect being his decision to walk into the bank with a gun. If the man walked into the bank with a bag of money, we would assume he was there to buy back his house. We would still have the cause being the bank foreclosing on his house and the effect being him going to the bank to buy back his house. But remember, if you've watched any of my earlier videos, you've probably heard me say that everything in a story is there to move that story forward. The cause and effect aspect of your story is no different. So here is the problem. Although the man showed up with his bag of money and paid to get his house back, there simply is no conflict, no worthwhile situation, no story. But if we go back to when the man walked into the bank with a gun instead of a bag of money, your reader will assume that he's there not to buy back his house, but for something like retribution. That's a good hook. Because not only do we have good cause and effect, we also have the potential for some sort of conflict which will lead to an eventual climax and resolution. If you're wondering about how climax and resolution fit into your story, I cover each of these in later videos. Now, I said potential because although with the introduction of a gun into a bank usually always creates conflict, for all we know, after seeing the security guard seated by the door, The man decides not to pull his gun out, but instead gets scared and walks back out again. We still have cause and effect, but since the effect didn't amount to any conflict, it didn't move the story forward. Here's another example. A woman walks into a motel room and after seeing her husband on the bed with another woman, starts crying. Here we have three characters and the setting. I'll cover the importance of these two aspects in later videos. There is cause, the woman seeing her husband on a bed with another woman. An effect, she starts crying. But that alone isn't enough to move the story along. We understand why she's crying, but we just don't care enough to watch her do it. How about this? A woman walks into a motel room, sees her husband on a bed with another woman, and so shoots him and then starts crying. Okay, we have cause. Seeing her husband on the bed with another woman, an effect, she shoots him. The anticipation of what might happen next is what moves the story forward. Even if she simply pulled the gun out of her purse, the effect would be holding the gun. We can assume her intentions for holding that gun were to fire it. But since she actually shoots her husband, killing him, she will either shoot the other woman or allow her to live. If she shoots the other woman, we are interested in finding out what happens next. Cause being she killed the other woman, and effect being what she does next. She might turn the gun on herself and fall down dead beside the cheating couple, or turn herself in, throwing herself on the mercy of the court. Or maybe she waits until she can collect the insurance money from the policy she took out on her husband. On the other hand, maybe she allows the other woman to live, cause she has left a witness to a murder. An effect being what she does next. Maybe she blackmails the other woman for her silence, or maybe the effect is that the two women run away together with the insurance money because they had planned the whole thing together from the start. If you haven't yet realized it, the beauty of cause and effect, it's like the gift that keeps on giving. Their whole purpose for being is to allow for the creation of even more cause and effects throughout your story. Cause. A man walks back into the bank with a note for the teller. Effect. After reading the note, the teller presses the hidden alarm button, which alerts the security guard by the door. Cause. The security guard pulls out his gun and approaches the man standing at the teller's window. Effect. The man sees the guard approaching and pulls out his gun and faces the security guard. Cause. Not wanting to be taken into custody, the man fires his gun in the direction of the security guard to scare him off. Effect. The security guard, thinking he is being shot at, defends himself as well as all the people in the bank by shooting at the man. The loud sounds of the guns create panic in the bank. Cause. Seeing that the exit door is left unguarded, the man runs for it. Effect. The security guard sees the man trying to make a run for it and quickly shoots him in the back, killing him instantly. And so on, and so on, and so on. This is actually what happens throughout your entire story. It's how stories are able to move forward. You see, without cause and effect, the man would have walked into the bank and simply did nothing. Actually, he wouldn't have even walked into the bank because if you remember, his walking into the bank was the effect of the bank foreclosing on his house. But think about this. The cause and effect of this story didn't start when the man walked into the bank after his house was foreclosed on. Not at all. Before the bank would have started foreclosure proceedings, he would have had to default on several payments. And before that, the man would have probably had a bad crop that year, making it impossible to make his payments, which would have led to non payment, which would have led to foreclosure, which would have led to his decision to rob the bank, which would have led to the decision of the bank teller to press the hidden alarm button, which started the shootout, which ended with the man being shot in the back and dying on the bank floor. So I guess you could say from the time the man had that bad crop, he was destined to end up dead on the bank floor. There is a lot of fun you can have with cause and effect as you mold your story with your characters. And more times than not, it is the effect of the previous incident that shows you the direction your story might take. In the end, with cause and effect in your arsenal, as long as you allow them some flexibility, they will undoubtedly help you take your story on a journey that your reader will most definitely enjoy. And now I'll tell you the ending to the story I call One Good Turn Deserves Another. When Helen arrived at their country home, Robert's sister Delilah greeted her at the front door. Delilah had listened to her brother describe how much Helen resembled Eliza on countless occasions, but didn't truly believe him until she was staring at her in the doorway. Completely convinced that Helen was indeed the reincarnation of Eliza, Delilah realized that this time she would take care of the returned Eliza in such a way that she wouldn't ever be able to return again. You see, Delilah was the type of sister that never believed that anyone was good enough for her younger brother, and these women were only interested in the family fortune. When she caused Eliza's car to run off the road, she believed she had saved her brother from another devious woman. But when she saw Helen, believing her to be the reincarnation of Eliza, standing in her doorway, she wasn't about to allow her brother to make the same mistake. So, after adjusting the brakes on Helen's car, Delilah waved goodbye to her, confident that that would be the last time anyone would see of Eliza and whoever else she might try to show up as. Thanks for watching, and if you found anything that I said beneficial to you in any way, hit that subscribe button because you never know. My next video might just be helpful too.